Let's go to your Broncos here and talk a little bit about the quarterback situation in Denver. Now, obviously, there's another option out there that maybe Denver fans are crossing their fingers for, but let's focus first on the guys that are in the facility. The Broncos making a move early on in this offseason to bring in Teddy Bridgewater in addition to Drew Lock, who's already there. What's sort of your kind of temperature on, or what's the temperature you've taken, let me say it that way, on the franchise and where it stands at quarterback right now?
Well, look, I've had this discussion with so many Broncos fans on the Lockdown Broncos podcast that I'm not going to talk about the unicorn quarterbacks out there, the hypotheticals, until that happens. But, we do have to focus on the guys on the roster. And so right now, the Broncos, they have Drew Lock entering his third year in the National Football League. They have Teddy Two Gloves, who is a veteran signing literally the day before the NFL draft. And to be honest with you, Teddy Bridgewater, he has yet to be at the at phase 2 of the workouts. He's been dealing with some personal stuff, but he's expected to be there for mandatory minicamp. But Vic Fangio has said this is going to be a 50-50 competition for the quarterback spot this upcoming year. I think Drew Lock will obviously get the first reps to start, but they're going to get the same sample size. And it's up to Drew Lock to really say, hey, look, I've got to take this competition in stride. He's been at phase 2. He's been at these voluntary workouts. He's been throwing in those drills. So he's taking advantage of it. He's getting ahead of it. He's made some mechanic changes to his footwork and his stance in the shotgun rather than being so heavy loaded where his right foot is back, because then it requires him to take more steps in his drop back, and it takes away from time to being able to process the field. So he's been working with Peyton Manning, which is great, but it's really going to be up to Drew Lock to take really a firm grasp on this and allow maybe even Teddy Bridgewater to mentor him. That's really what it's going to be. That's the hope that the Broncos have, is that Drew Lock can win this competition and Teddy could be a great veteran mentor for him along the way, because if anything ever happens to Drew, they'd be confident in Teddy Bridgewater coming in. Now, if Teddy wins the job in competition, Ross, it's going to tell the Broncos, okay, Drew Lock is not the guy, and we're going to have to focus after this year on a long-term solution at the position. Right. And so that's kind of where Denver's at. But, at the same time, too, we talked about these situations at quarterback. Denver feels very strongly, regardless if it's Teddy, whether it's Drew, that they will have a good team around them this year because they're focused on running the football. They've got Melvin Gordon. They've got Javonte Williams, who was arguably one of the best backs in the NFL draft this past year. So we'll see how that plays out. They're getting Cortland Sutton back on the outside, and they have Tim Patrick. So you have 6'4", 6'5" size on the outside, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler speed, and not to mention Tyree Cleveland coming into the mix a little bit, and Noah Fant. I can't even forget Noah Fant. And a more solidified offensive line right now. Right tackle is a little bit of a question, but Denver's got a better offensive product on paper and a very strong defense. So it might take that pressure off the quarterback position this year, but if Drew Lock takes that next step and explodes, Denver's going to be sitting in a really good spot.
I got to tell you how refreshing it is to hear someone else talking about whether or not it's going to be Drew or Teddy next year. That feels pretty good. No, but I think that Denver has found themselves, even just with the options in the facility, right? Not acknowledging or talking about the unicorns. We will talk about the unicorns and the hypotheticals. We'll get to that. But as we focus on the guys that are in the facility, they're in a really good place here in terms of trying to figure out what's next for them at the quarterback position. We talked about this with the New York Giants before, right? There's enough around the quarterback position for Denver to be able to make an accurate evaluation about what their next step is. If Drew Lock takes a step forward, he'll have the weapons to be able to win with this team. If he doesn't, and Teddy Bridgewater ends up having to come in, or Drew Lock gets hurt, right? Something completely outside of anybody's control, then all of a sudden you understand that you have still a very, very good environment upon which to bring and introduce a new quarterback, whether it be through the draft, whether it be through free agency in the offseason. You've put together, the Denver Broncos have a vehicle for which or in which you can plug in a quarterback and find success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think culture is really important too. We talk about environment, we talk about culture. Organizations need stability in these areas, I think, for any player to succeed, but more importantly, the quarterback position, as we've talked about. Right now, I think the Broncos have a really strong culture. Now, there's fans on the outside that, yes, you look at the losing seasons and you may not equate that, but what George Payton and Vic Fangio have built in that locker room, I mean, that locker room is very tight-knit with Vic Fangio. They love him. Right. They really respect him as a coach, and that coaching staff is pretty well-rounded across the board. We talk about Mike Munchak. We talk about John Pagano at the outside linebacker coach. Christian Parker is a DB coach. I mean, Denver's got all these different experienced players and obviously guys that have been around the game for a long time.
Right.
So that bodes well. And so George Payton has really come in. He's really embraced culture, and that's been a really big thing. And their draft process leading up, they were all about selecting guys that have character and leadership on and off the field. Those are the top qualities. And if a guy didn't have leadership traits on the field or even off the field and you were concerned, they weren't even on the Broncos board. So it tells you how much they view Patrick Surtain as their first round selection, which look, I'm excited to see him play. But
Yeah.
Denver's got the team this year that can compete. We'll see if the quarterback play can elevate it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about the hypotheticals, right? And explore the
Okay.
possibilities for the Denver Broncos. Aaron Rodgers being on the market, oftentimes if he's on the market, let me say it that way. Oftentimes when people are talking about destinations, Denver Broncos come up. Does this feel like something that could happen for the Denver Broncos if Aaron Rodgers is actually on the market? Can they afford him? Does he fit? Is Denver a good landing spot for him?
Yeah, Denver's got, I believe they're in the top 5 in terms of available cap space. And, obviously we're looking at that post June 1st designation. If in fact the deal were to happen, it wouldn't cost the Green Bay Packers $33 million, which if they did it right now, $33 million dead cap would account for Rodgers being off. They don't want to pay that. So after June 1st, it drops down to $17 million, which you're okay with eating that up a little bit. So there is a possibility that Denver, like if Rodgers is available, the Broncos will make an offer. They will make a push and they'll try to see what they can do to acquire him. And you just really can't help but think, like, how lucky are the Broncos if this were to happen? I mean, you get Peyton Manning. You had John Elway. I mean, Jake Plummer is a pretty good signing for them. He took them to the AFC Championship game in 2005. You go through quarterback purgatory from 2006 all the way to 2012, and then you get Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning leads you to some great 4 years of football, and then you've been in purgatory ever since, right? And then all of a sudden, a future first ballot Hall of Famer is going to fall into your laps once again. I mean, I just can't think of anything more crazy for Denver. But then again, it's like, what do the Broncos do at this point if, in fact, they do acquire Aaron Rodgers? What happens when Aaron Rodgers retires? What are you doing to prepare for that inevitability at some point, 3 to 4 years, maybe 5 years from now? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole situation. But it really just depends on where Rodgers' head is at. And, he's been very outspoken this offseason about kind of how he feels. And there was a report that John Elway and Aaron Rodgers were playing golf together. That's not the case. They didn't play golf together. They bumped into each other. And obviously
very different.
So we'll see how things go. But yeah, Rodgers would immediately elevate this team. I mean, to be honest with you, Denver would have to give up a lot of future draft capital, which I think, you make that it's a investment you're willing to make. You want to see if the ROI is going to come back on that. But then outside of that, you might have to give up a couple of talented pieces, but Denver's talent all across the board, Rodgers would elevate them immediately, I think, to be favorites to compete with Kansas City in the AFC West.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you get more years out of Rodgers than you give up draft picks, then you've probably won that trade, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the way that I look at it. You get more successful years out of Aaron Rodgers than the 3 years of draft picks. Let's just say that you end up getting shipped out. That's a win for Denver.